On my last Appalachian Trail section hike, I was sitting in a shelter about an hour before sundown when two southbound thru hikers stopped about 15 minutes apart. I chatted with each for a couple of minutes before they moved on. They were headed to another shelter about 6.5 miles away, and they had about 90 minutes of daylight to get there. I didn't ask if they planned to hike in the dark, and if they moved at 4 miles an hour, they could reach the next shelter before dark. But were they planning to do either? The AT Conservancy says the distance between shelters averages 8 miles and varies at the extremes between 5 and 30 miles. So if we're hiking for distance and always stay at shelters, we have the choice on average of walking either 8, 16, or 24 miles a day. As I've said before, rightly or wrongly, I have repeatedly found such limited options a major inconvenience. I have repeatedly walked past shelters when I thought it was too early to stop for the day, and I've done it knowing I would not reach the next shelter before dark. What I did on those days was camp at an undeveloped site. On my last section hike, I did it 3 nights. Many long-distance AT hikers will do the same thing with frequency. Others won't. This video is for those who want to be prepared to do it when needed. AT hikers usually call this stealth camping, and that is our topic. I should point out very quickly that in other, if not most, contexts, stealth camping describes camping at places where it's either not permitted or where we don't have permission. Yet, in my talks with others on the trail, I've never heard another AT hiker even hint that their stealth camping involved breaking any rules. In other words, they were telling me they stayed at undeveloped sites where it was not prohibited. Rules vary up and down the trail. If we respect the trail, we should follow every rule there is. The trail is too busy and too many people are watching for us to do otherwise. Bad behavior gives AT hikers a bad reputation. I talked about that before, the link's in the description. The AT Conservancy states the case for staying only in shelters. Staying at shelters reduces hiker impact on the trail environment and is a good leave no trace practice. It concentrates use in a relatively small area. Meanwhile, other areas stay pristine. The link's in the description. What the ATC hopes to avoid, I suspect, is lush vegetation being trampled down and killed by repeated camping. I have found that easy to avoid because I have found it easy to find tent spots that have no lush vegetation growing. We're going to look at a number of such spots in a minute because we're going to talk about how to find stealth camping sites. Before we do, however, there are 2 related topics. One is water. At most unprepared sites, we will find no water. Most people are going to want to have ample water when they camp because most folks eat at camp, either morning, evening, or both. Among other reasons, some AT hikers choose shelters because they depend on finding water there when they stop for the night. I have long suspected some of these folks are walking past other water sources during the day. In other words, they don't want to add weight to their pack by picking up more water earlier in the day. So instead, they figure they have enough water to make it to the shelter and they'll load up on more water there. It's a plan that does make sense, but because I've hiked on the AT twice in drought conditions, I don't do it. If I don't have 2 liters of water on me, I'll stop at a water source, so I do have 2 liters. There have been nights when I easily could have run dry without this practice, even when staying at a shelter. When I do know I will stealth camp on any given day, and usually I do know that, I might leave a water source with 3 or 4 liters. This amounts to a weight versus convenience trade-off. It's a convenience to me to hike past shelters so I can make the most of the available daylight. And picking up water does add weight. My low base pack weight makes carrying water less of an issue. Another detail is that the AT is so hilly, I have repeatedly found stealth spots on the tops of hills or ridges. I have heard others say they will not camp at such places, and the reason they give is that hilltops increase the odds of high wind or at least blowing wind during rain. They are thinking, no doubt, of the fact many modern tents sold by multiple manufacturers are designed to be pitched with the bottoms of the walls about 5 inches or so off the ground, which can let in strong wind and maybe the rain flying with it. On one hand, I respect the gear choices of others, which are none of my business, and I value and respect gear manufacturers. On the other hand, you will see pigs fly on silver wings past hell frozen over before you see me use a tent like that. And this photo shows at a quick glance why I say that. This photo was shot in a valley surrounded by tall hills. There were no protection against the wind, which plastered snow onto the side of my tent. Notice how thick the snow is at the ground where many tents have an opening. In the summer, strong wind could have sent rain flying sideways at this same spot. I always assume nasty weather will come after me, and it often does. I don't want to use anything but windproof tents with 4-season capability year-round. As I have said, to meet this goal, I was forced to make my own tents long before current tent designs appeared. I earlier told when I bought a Gatewood Cape, which is designed to have elevated walls, I modified it to pitch right on the ground, and as I've often said, if I think condensation will be an issue, I leave the bottom of the door open a foot or so. But let's face it, I am a cranky extremist about this. Nobody's going to imitate me, and the hilltops will spook a lot of people. Gale force winds will blow over trees on hilltops, no doubt, but I've seen fallen trees all over the AT at all elevations. The good news is that none of the AT stealth spots I'm about to show you are on hilltops. Which leads us to our next topic. How do we find stealth spots, and how easy are they to find? On my last section hike, I did a survey of stealth spots along a roughly 5-mile section of trail. Basically, I kept my eyes open and videoed each I found, which brings up a point. Usually, we don't think about looking for a stealth spot until we need one. And on the AT, it's easy to plod along without paying too much attention to what's on either side of us. If, on the other hand, we get into the habit of noticing potential stealth spots as we walk past them, it will sharpen our eye. It will improve our ability to find a stealth camping spot when we need one. I was surprised at how many I found in 5 miles when I bothered to pay attention. This was between Daleville and Jennings Creek in Virginia. It is not excessively hilly, but it isn't flat there either. It will be more difficult to find spots along extremely steep sections of the trail. So, let's take a look. If we are walking along this section of trail without raising our head, we easily might overlook this, a flat spot big enough for 2 or 3 tents. The same thing could happen here. If we look up and turn our head, we find another decent site. Here's a spot so big it almost looks like a side trail. Here's another one right next to the trail, so big it would be hard to miss. In some areas, like the Shenandoah National Park, we're not supposed to camp this close to the trail. Where it is allowed, I have done it. Here are 2 decent ones, but we'd have to raise our head to notice them. Here's another one quite close to the trail, and yet another close to the trail. If we move a piece of wood or 2, we'll have a nice bed of leaves here. If we turn our head here, we find another one. And yet again, another one right next to the trail. Here's one I would pass up. I might be wrong about this, but the volume of moss growing here would make me suspect this spot might flood in the rain. And finally, for the real aficionado, there's this spot, which I've talked about before. It couldn't be seen from the trail, but on the trail I looked uphill and noticed I couldn't see the bottom of the trees. So I walked up for a look and found it was flat. If I plan to stealth camp, I start looking for a spot about 30 minutes before sundown. That gives me an hour of daylight to find one. So far, I've always found one before dark. When looking for a stealth spot, I always tell myself there is a risk I won't find one. But so far I have every time. If the day ever comes when I have to find one in the dark, I carry a decent light and expect I will live through it. There's one last detail. Stealth camping spots have no outhouses. I implore all AT hikers to carry a trowel. It is the best way I know of to dig a decent hole, dig it deep, and dig it quickly. And now once again we're done. My thanks to all my loyal viewers who watch every video. If you have not subscribed yet, please consider it. And like I always say, thanks a million for watching.